So, like trying to take a look at that in a different light.
You spent time in refugee camps across the Middle East. How has that experience, meeting those people, or other experiences, you spent a lot of time in the Middle East, how has that shaped the characters in this film?
Well, I love the Middle East. I mean, I feel very drawn to the Middle East. I think it's a fascinating place with beautiful people. These are stories from the Middle East. And, I got very drawn into Syria because if people don't really understand the Arab Spring, it's kind of a fascinating thing that happened in a similar time to when like we in the US started to have our own financial crisis. They weren't exactly corresponding, but it was similar. The Arab Spring happened all across the Arab world, but it was more dramatic in certain countries than in others. And what happened was, like, depending on how an Arab leader handled it, is what dictated what took place in that country. So if you look at a country like Jordan, the king of Jordan handled things very well, and the country still had protests, still had issues, but the country continued to function and things went on. What happened in Syria, there were protests. Bashar al-Assad, the president of Syria, he turned against his own people and, got very violent and started bombing his own people. And all of a sudden, civil war became the new norm in his country. Started torturing and killing his own people. And the next thing you know, millions of people were fleeing for their lives just to try to survive. And the interesting thing that I found about Syrians is that these are very peaceful, good people. And much like the protester here with his flowers, like when Syrian regime soldiers would turn their weapons on Syrian protesters, they would put flowers in their guns, and yet they would get shot. And really, if you trace this back, this all started in Syria due to a few kids who scribbled writings on a wall against Assad. These were just kids. And this really, really rubbed Assad the wrong way. And so like I took this deep interest in this because I felt like here's this bully who probably could have like brought people in and solved this issue. And instead, he created this massive civil war that led to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people and the displacement of millions of people. And I wanted to do something about it. And I talked earlier about like this kind of saint and sinner feeling that I get. And I, like there's this feeling in me that I want to go fight. And I try to avoid that at all costs because it's not good for me to do that. So I try to channel that into art. And that's what I've tried to do here is create a piece of art that will hopefully show what was done and hopefully create a lasting testament to what the Syrian people went through.
One thing that's really interesting about the film is this sort of dual sides of characters where you see someone that you say, wow, that's not a good person. They're doing something, committing some act of violence against someone else or sort of hurting someone else through helping themselves. And then on the flip side, you see that same person who is taking care of their family, or, you see the sort of the human side of maybe some of the reasons why they're doing some of these horrible things or difficult things. How do you think about these different characters and how you showed both the tough parts of what these people went through, but also the humanity of who they were?
People are tricky. And I think it's important that we recognize that, oftentimes we try to present ourselves in the best light possible, which
everybody does that.
I think it's a natural human behavior, but I think it's very dangerous because it's not real life. I don't want to show things that are phony, and I don't like phony things. So like my characters, So you're talking about the smuggler in this instance, and for part of what you're talking about. The smuggler he's doing detestable things. I met with a smuggler who was very much like this guy, West African smuggler living in Turkey. I met with him. We sat on the banks of the Aegean Sea at a pizza place having pizza. And I'm thinking, like, I've been to Turkey over 20 times. And I'm thinking, when I finally got a meeting lined up with this guy, what am I going to say, or what am I going to have in common with this guy? Because, like, I love the Syrian people. Yeah, I know this guy's making a ton of money. I know he sent a ton of people to their death. I just want to reach across the table and probably, like, tap into that kind of, like, center part of me and like hurt him. But that also doesn't solve anything, because, like, someone will just replace him. It doesn't do anything. I need to understand him. And so we start talking. We're eating our pizza. And I find out, like, he's a single dad. He has a son about Brody's age. And I'm like, let's talk about that for a while. I find out this guy loves his son. Man, he loves him. And like, why is he doing it? He's doing it because he loves his son. And like, as I'm sitting there with him, I see he's got a pistol in his like, he's got a pistol in his pocket. And, like, rather than hiding it, I ask him about his pistol. And I'm like, why you bring a pistol to lunch? He's like, I don't know you. And I'm like, okay, I understand that. But we go through all these motions, but I realize, like, despite this guy's, like, all the coldness this guy has, he warms up every time we talk about his son. Every time. Loves his son. And I can tell he's a good dad. And his son's not well. And he's a single dad, doesn't want to talk about what happened to his wife. I don't know what happened to her, or and he's just trying to get by like the rest of us. Are his methods good? No. And is it forgivable? I'm not his judge. I certainly am not okay with the way that he's doing things, but he is the man that he is. I can't change him. And he tells me that he hopes someday to go to America. That's weird. It's weird that that's his hope. He wanted to change his life. So all this goes back into the script. So when I'm writing this, I try to put my own emotions onto this character and my own insecurities as a dad of, like, I work too. And, like, there are times that, like, I'm away and I wish I was there. I'm like, what am I doing? I'm over in Turkey, and, like, I should be back home with my son. So I'm not doing the same things he's doing, but, like, I'm falling short sometimes too. And I need to be like, I need to be self-aware enough that I also am, like, not harmless. Now, maybe my sins aren't his sins, but does that mean I'm the judge? Also, I don't think that's okay. That's not who I am. I'm not the one making those calls. So I don't think that I'm qualified to judge the magnitude of sins. And I can only look at myself and say I can do better. And I hope he does too. But on that day, the one thing I know is the one thing we did have in common was we both loved our sons. And while I detest what he was doing, we found some common ground.
I think this is something that's deeply in you that I've seen, is that, like, you really don't judge people, and most everybody else does judge people. And so I think that's helped me a lot of just, like, try to breathe, take a second, and try to put yourself in this person's shoes. It doesn't matter who it is. Could be someone living on the street. It could be someone who's said something horrible to you, or, raged at you on the freeway or something. But just, realize that they're going through something. There's something, and maybe part of why they're like this is they're going through something maybe horrific, maybe impossible. And, you know, this is the sort of the only way they can sort of deal with this horrific thing that they're experiencing in this other part of their life.
Yeah, I try to think about not judging people. Think about someone on their worst day and don't judge people for their worst day. I mean, there are certainly others that have to do that, but that's not for me to do. And if you think about your worst day, consider that person
Think
maybe
about it a lot.
well, if you think about your worst day and you consider that person may be having their worst day,
Yeah.
makes it a little easier to have empathy.
What do you want people to get from watching I Was a Stranger?
I feel like my job as an artist and as a filmmaker is to put you in a position to feel. I don't want to make films that are sterile. And if you watch the film and you're moved by it, whatever you felt, that's perfect. And if you leave the film emotionally moved, then I did what I intended to do.
I know a lot of people, when a humanitarian crisis hits, you know, they kind of they start texting their friends about it. They start posting online about how terrible it is. But you're somebody that I've seen over and over again, like run to those places and actually help people. How did you start to get involved in some of these refugee and crises around the world? And what's kind of drawn you into that?
Because I think because we have such an international background, I feel very comfortable in other parts of the world and with other people. I can't think of a place I've been in the world where I haven't been comfortable. And so kind of the first time I went somewhere that was disaster related, I mean, I guess as a kid we would go to, help during hurricanes in Florida, but as an adult I went to Haiti 3 days after the earthquake, and I helped there for 10 days because of my French, and I helped with a team of doctors in Haiti. And then I went to the DR Congo, and I helped there during the war. Syria, Turkey. I was in Syria during the war. Gaza. I was the first American to fly humanitarian aid over Gaza. Jordan. I mean, I just feel comfortable in these areas because I think people need help. I feel comfortable helping. I don't need to I don't broadcast it. I don't publish it. I'm not I guess in Haiti, I was on Twitter at the time and haven't been since. It does a lot for me to help.
What does it do?
I think it gives me meaning, gives my life meaning.
Yeah. When you help somebody else, it ends up helping you way more, right? Like the more you give, it really is true, the more you receive. And maybe no more than in a time when someone is almost left with nothing or has nothing. And then you're kind of there for them. And even like perfect strangers, like you're there in the greatest moment of their need and you kind of just show up.
Yeah, I think that's right.
What do you remember about being in Haiti?
What part of it?